Welcome to the Nursing Post podcast, All Nursing All the Time with Ashley Moore and Rosa Horsley. In this episode, we discuss a very controversial topic of Roe versus Wade and the very recent Texas Supreme Court ruling, Senate Bill number 8. Our goal is always to inform and to start conversation.
Like Rosa had said, it is very controversial. And of course, I think that's part of the intrigue in us wanting to talk about it a little bit. From the church to politics and medicine, there is no lack of opinion when it comes to this topic. So much so that we can remember in high school and college papers that we were not allowed to write about this subject at all. It was a no-go zone. The fact is the original ruling set a precedent in 1973 that has left so many at odds, and there's so many different opinions since that ruling. I don't listen to the news, but even I know that this recent Texas Supreme Court ruling has just been really blowing everything up to the point to where I've actually pulled up the news and did some reading, which Rosa can attest is very unlikely.
You try to stay out of a lot of things. You try to stay out of the news. You try to stay out of religion, and you try to stay out of politics. But I mean, it's funny because this has all of that, and it has a basis in, nursing and in the medical field. So it's like, it's hot right now. It's a very jaw kind of dropping bill that's in the Senate floor. And we figured, why not?
Well, of course. I mean, there are so many medical professionals, and I'm sure there's others that think similarly to the way that I do, to where my personal opinion should not get into the way of other people's personal opinion. It's a respect thing.
Absolutely.
I've had a couple of different little thought processes, and I'm really curious because I know you Rosa, are going to have some probably very insightful thoughts on this. So it's, as we get into more of the discussion, they'll come up naturally, but I am really curious to see what your thoughts are.
Well, I did some digging and I wanted statistics, pretty much based on after the ruling in 1973. And to be quite frank, I was expecting higher statistics than what I actually found. And what I found was from the CDC, and the latest data that had been gathered was from 2018. And it said in 2018 that 619,591 legally induced abortions were reported. It also said that the abortion rate was 11.3 per every 1,000 women aged 15 to 44. And the abortion ratio was 189 abortions per 1,000 live births. Then it goes from 2009 to 2018, which is a long stretch. And it says that the number, the rate, and the ratio of reported abortions had decreased to 22%, 24%, and then 16%. So to me, that was like I thought in my mind, the numbers would be higher, but astonishingly enough, it's a dramatic decrease in the rate of abortion. In 2018, women in their 20s accounted for a majority of abortions. They were 57.7%. And with the majority of abortions that took place, they were performed before or at 13 weeks of gestation. And an even smaller number of abortions were performed at 14 to 20 weeks. And an even fewer percent, which was about 1%, were performed after that 21 weeks of gestation. So it was surprising to see the age bracket of, the women and demographic, I guess, of women who are having abortions. In 2018, 38.6% of all abortions were early medical abortions. So that means like there was no surgical intervention.
Hmm.
So this would be like medications or Plan Bs and things like that. It did say in the CDC statistics that there was an increase of these types of abortions by 9%, and that there was a dramatic increase of 120% from 2009 and 2018. And I think some of that is because Plan B wasn't always made public.
Right.
I mean, that's just a recent thing. So, of course, more people had the option of using Plan B here recently than they did in 2019, 2010, 2011, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
So I can understand the uptick there in the non-surgical abortion rate.
I'm curious if that is because of the amount of the Plan B that was sold, because Plan B is for what, 72, within 72 hours of intercourse.
Correct. Of unprotected sex, they say.
And are they just saying that how do they know that that person who took Plan B had actually gotten pregnant? Because not every time you have unprotected sex will you get pregnant. So
That's true.
I wonder if they're saying, oh, it's this huge increase, but is it
Maybe from the
really?
purchase of, like you're saying, maybe
Mhm.
that's the only statistic they have to go on
Yeah,
is like the purchase amount of
right.
Plan B.
Because I mean, if only half of those were truly pregnant, then that number's not quite, that percentages wouldn't be quite as dramatic. And I mean, I don't
Mhm,
know off the top of my head, what percentage of women who have unprotected sex will end up pregnant. But
mhm.
I mean, I
And
know
I'm not
people
trying to be
who,
funny, but I don't know anybody that knows that they're pregnant in 3 days.
no, not
No.
well, unless people that are actively trying and they're like ovulating one day
Mhm,
and they're taking like those tests. And I mean, that's a small percentage of women in couples. I thought it was interesting that you kind of give these statistics. A lot of what you says 92%, just over 92% of abortions were performed at 13 weeks or less. And to kind of go back a little bit, you do have to understand what Roe versus Wade was. And it's funny, I knew Roe versus Wade. I understood that it was about abortion, but I really didn't know. I really didn't know what it was all about. So I actually had to do some history, do some digging to actually
me
understand,
too.
well, hold on, what was this about? What did it really rule on? I don't trust the media, any of them. So
Mhm,
I have to do my own due diligence. But in January of 1973, that is when the Supreme Court struck down the Texas statute banning abortions. So that effectively legalized it across the United States. Now, other states had already done this, but if you are in a lower income uh, neighborhood population where you just can't go to a different state that had already legalized it, or hey,
mhm,
you didn't know that doctor friend that could do it for you and pay a good amount of money, it was just a little bit iffy. So it really was for the lower class persons who needed abortion.
mhm.
The court stated that it was a woman's right to have an abortion, and that this was protected by the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment is about rights to privacy. It's nobody's business what you're doing
Yeah, your body, your
with
choice.
yourself.
What women have been, pretty much preaching this whole entire time. What I do with my body is my choice.
Right. And to back it up even further, in June of 1970, the Texas court ruled that the state's abortion ban was illegal because it violated the constitutional rights to privacy. So it was a slow, very, very slow movement. And ultimately the woman, the Roe, and that wasn't even her name. So
Mhm,
that's confusing in itself. I'm like, but whatever. She ended up giving birth to this child and putting it up for adoption.
mhm,
It
she
was,
did.
and she had done that several other times beforehand as well.
Mhm,
The court divided pregnancy into 3 trimesters, and said that you pretty much have up to the first trimester to get an abortion.
That's like for the woman's choice, like her
Yes.
right to privacy.
Right.
So it's saying like you have that first 12-ish weeks and
Right.
of that first trimester where you can go on your own accord
Mhm.
to a clinic and decide that you no longer want to continue this pregnancy,
Right.
which is super important because
Mhm.
when you go on and talk about how they keep dividing pregnancy into 3 trimesters, it starts limiting your right to abortion.
Yes. So in the second trimester, the government would start regulation, essentially, um, not ban it, but be like, all right, well, hold on. Hey, you've known about this for 3 months. Why haven't we done something before now? I mean, this could be a health issue that pops up. There's a lot of different things. Maybe that you're going to have a child, but it's not going to be a viable birth, or it's only a matter of time before you're going to, spontaneously abort, and
Mhm.
it's safer to do it under medical guidance. I mean, there's a lot of different things. And this is where the nursing part of me goes, well, there's more to abortion than voluntary abortion. And
Absolutely.
I think that that word has such a bad stigma on it, and it shouldn't, but I understand to people who aren't in the medical field why it does. In the third trimester, the state could prohibit abortion to protect the fetus, because at that point they're stating that it's a baby almost. It's not a baby, and that's a whole big old thing. But ultimately, if you were to give birth today, it could still survive.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
And so
pretty
at
much
that
what it's
point,
saying.
it's like at that point, that's where the rights, and I use that term loosely, kind of change. Like, okay, well, hold on, it's not a fetus; it's more than a fetus because it could live on its own.
And I think it's saying that the only exception that they were making for an abortion this late in the game, so to speak, or in the pregnancy, is if the mother's health is at risk.
Right.
Um, and that's the
Which
only consideration at this point that they would give.
right. And so, and personally, I'm like, well, at that point, you could do a elective cesarean. There are options. You could induce labor. There's a whole bunch
Mhm.
of different options that you could go through. It's more regulated. Every step of the way, it gets more and more regulated. In the 1950s and the 1960s, the estimated number of illegal abortions in the US was from anywhere from 200,000 to 1.2 million per year.
And mind you, these illegal abortions are what we would consider, back alley.
They're not
Um,
safe.
yeah, they're not safe. These are people who would go to maybe it kind of reminds me of our episode on organ trafficking.
Mhm.
Like maybe they went to this clinic
Yep.
that was outside of hours, done in the dark, minimal staff,
Right.
things weren't sterilized, there was no anesthesia. Like, so when we're saying that these were illegally done, they were done outside of the law, at home, after hours,
Mhm.
under the table by medical professionals,
Yep.
midwives, what
Mhm.
have you. So that's a pretty scary statistic, seeing that this number here, this statistic, is so much higher than that of legal abortions that were reported in 2018.
So since Roe versus Wade in 1973 hit, there have been an estimated, and it depends on where you look at, about 62 million abortions. So that's probably
Is
the
that
number
United
that,
States or worldwide?
no, that's in the United States.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
It now the problem again is I don't think there's a lot of differentiation.
Yeah, because the
But
CDC says these are legally induced.
mhm,
So I'm starting now to wonder like what their definition of legally induced is.
right. And so I think that this is the flip side to what so many people um, say with this Texas law, that these are all people who have essentially died, um, and weren't given rights and
The
whatnot.
option.
Right.
Hmm.
And
Well,
so
let's talk about the recent Texas ruling. because that's
Okay.
really a lot of the reason why we decided to do this topic was because, it's a hot button topic. It's always
Mhm.
been. But then this Senate 8 bill that's sitting on the Texas Senate floor now, is causing a lot of controversy
Yes.
because it just about nearly bans almost all abortion in the state of Texas.
And that's
So,
the one of the big things that I am not somebody who is overtly pro-abortion, just personally. Um,
mhm,
I think that there's a time and place for it. I would never think that somebody should ban it. I think that anybody who believes in absolutes like that has no recollection of life.
absolutely.
But to put something this strict and stringent in place, to me, and it may come out a little rude, but I think it's just ignorant.
It is ignorant. It says 85 to 90% of procedures in the state of Texas, and they mean procedures as abortions, happened after 6 weeks of pregnancy. So it was still first trimester if you're going
Mhm.
via the initial ruling in 1973.
Right.
And this Senate bill, it says that the law in Texas says doctors cannot perform abortions if a heartbeat is detected actively. That starts around 6 weeks before many women even are aware that they're pregnant. I mean, and it's true, a lot of women don't even realize they're pregnant at 6 weeks. Sometimes it's 7 weeks, sometimes it's 8 weeks, especially if
Mhm.
you're already like have issues with your cycle. Your cycle's not, every 28 days. If you skip months, if you continuously have them during certain months, I
Right.
mean, there's a lot of factors on a women's health side that come into play with this law, which we're going to talk about here in our opinions shortly. The law in Texas is different because it's even drafted to make it more difficult for individual defendants or persons that are having issues with wanting abortions to like sue the state or take it to the Supreme Court. Not only did they make this bill to one say no abortions after the heart rate or heartbeat is present, but
Mhm.
then on top of that, if you are at 7 weeks and there a heartbeat's detected, you have no rights. You have no
Right.
rights to sue for the abortion, and you have to have the baby, period.
Mhm.
Unless you do what they were doing in the 1950s and 60s, which we'll also talk about here shortly.
Which is my concern
So
as a healthcare worker. I think that's exactly what's gonna happen.
exactly. I think it's just, we'll talk about that in a second. So not only in this bill does it say that there are no exemptions, because basically it's also saying if you're a victim of rape and that there's a child that becomes a product of that, or a pregnancy that becomes a product of that, or if you have a child or a pregnancy that's a product of incest, you still are not allowed to abort. Even though this was not your will, this was not your choice or decision to be raped or to be, a victim of incest, you still have to have this child. And on top of that, it says that the state now has the right to sue anybody that helps said patient obtain an abortion. It cannot sue the patient, but it can sue the doctor, the staff member of the clinics, any counselors who gave counseling to the patient, even to the fact of the person, the taxi cab driver
Mhm.
driving them to the clinic to get said abortion can be sued. So it's not only scaring the patient, it's scaring everybody, knowing
Mhm.
that they can be sued just for participating in an abortion,
Mhm.
whether it be rape or incest or anything. And to me, that right, the fact that it's a law, and then the fact that you're making these, basically you're putting into law, there are no and or ifs about it. It is what it is. There's nothing that you can do in these instances. I,
Mhm.
I don't I don't feel that's right. I don't feel that's right to the woman. I don't think that's right to the child that's about to be born. I mean, I don't think that's right at all, especially if you're a victim and survivor of incest and or rape. You're already traumatized. And
Mhm.
now you have somebody telling you from the state and from the Supreme Court, basically, you're SOL.
Mhm.
You've been traumatized, will probably suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder for the rest of your life, and now you have to have a child from that situation.
So I'll read what they say about that. It says that there are public, and this is directly from the bill. Public and private agencies provide pregnancy prevention counseling and medical referrals for obtaining pregnancy prevention medications or devices, including emergency contraception for victims of rape or incest.
It's just crazy to me. It's crazy to me. Women have a lot to, unfortunately, in the United States of America, women have been oppressed for a long time. And I feel like this ruling is pushing us back. So it leaves me baffled how anybody, I mean, isn't this a violation of my 14th Amendment? The whole purpose of somebody telling me that I can't do what's right for myself, for my family, but then you're jumping down my neck, telling me we're overpopulated, we have too many children, the list goes on and on and on. But just from a medical and health standpoint, how do you physically and mentally expect a woman who's been raped or a victim of incest or a survivor of incest to have to not only deal with that fact, but then carry this child for the 9 months, 40 weeks that it takes for it to be born? How do you live with that every single day and the government say it's okay? Or even better than that, when you listen to the governor of Texas tell you ignorantly on television, on the news, saying that incest and rape will never happen now under his watch since this law is being passed. Like, how ignorant of a statement is that?
I don't think that there's even words for that. I mean, that's, you know, I have a lot of opinions on a lot of things. I feel as though for anybody to make, like I said, any absolutes is just wrong. I mean, there's things that could happen in this bill that could make it so much better, like taking that out. Like if it's from rape or incest or molestation, whatever you want to call it, then you should have the ability to have an abortion. Roe
I
v.
agree with
Wade is
that.
at about 22 weeks ish, to where they say that the fetus is then viable to live on its own. And at that point, it's kind of, I guess, immoral. I don't even know. But at that point, it needs to be a medical, made in a medical decision, a medical issue.
I
But
agree.
that gives you
It doesn't
22
even
weeks.
give you the option.
No.
Let's say in my instance, okay, with my son, it was a hell of a pregnancy. I had all
Hmm.
these issues, and technically, had I not had an emergency cesarean, we both would have died.
Right.
So I was very blessed that we both survived. But what about the mothers who are that far along in their pregnancy, that are 28, 29 weeks of pregnancy, and their life is at risk, and you're telling them
Hmm.
to basically screw their life and screw the life of their unborn child? They're both going to have to die because you're no longer giving them the option, or the doctors the option, to save the life of the pregnant woman.
Well, the law does say that there is exceptions for medical emergencies, and that pretty much it has to be the risk of infection or hemorrhage, that it potentially endangers subsequent pregnancies or can make them infertile. That would be another exception.
But who decides the exception? The doctor, or the
Well,
state,
these are
or
like,
the government?
this is legit listed in this bill, like the things I'm saying. And then that there is also risk for like breast cancer problems. And like, those are the things that are listed in here, and it has to still be done with the physician. The physician has to put their name in there, has to write what the medical emergency is specifically. Like, you can't just say that he or she deems it a medical emergency. It has to state their name and that this is the medical emergency that's going to pretty much cost the patient their life if they don't have an abortion. And so I was kind of surprised. I was like, really? I mean, that's like 4 things that they've just, like, who decided that these are your 4 issues like that? So no medical professional was around in the development of this bill.
No, I don't think so. And then to me, on the flip side of this, how many doctors do you think are going to feel comfortable?
They're not. I think that's the whole purpose.
How many doctors do you think feel comfortable putting their name on the line and saying that this is a medical emergency when they in this bill can still turn around and be sued by the state?
Well, not by the state, by
or the federal government or individuals.
It's by the individuals, because that's how the state's getting around it. That's where they found this big old loophole. Is it's not like, oh, it's the state's not doing it. The state is not allowed to do this. But legit, I could know that my neighbor got an abortion and I can sue all these people as an individual.
It still listen, there are so many people that have in the past like killed abortion doctors, blown up clinics. There's really extreme radicalism when it comes to this situation already. So like I said, I don't know how comfortable I would feel as a physician putting my name on the line, even though I know I'm doing the right thing. Who's to say one of those radicals aren't going to take up and sue me or blow up my house or, shoot me or whatever.
So I did look up as well, because, the whole thing with this bill, I think that really has people in an uproar, is this 6 weeks thing. So I was like, well, dang it, when does the average woman know they're pregnant? Like, I don't even know the answer to that. So I looked it up, because everything you can look up everything. 23
yeah, you can.
of women, these numbers are from 1990 to 2012. They haven't changed. So it was like in 30 years they hadn't changed, or 23 years or whatever it was. 23% of women found out they were pregnant late, and late being after 6 weeks.
Well, I don't see how that's determined as late.
Well, this is my thing. So even if you say, so that's 23%. Okay, great. So that's what, 70-some% of women know they're pregnant before 6 weeks, right? However,
less.
So if 77% of women know that they're pregnant before 6 weeks, why is it a problem? Then they have time to get an abortion. Well, no, because the average time it takes a woman to know they're pregnant is 5.5 weeks.
But then you have to remember, you still have to go through a counseling session. With whichever clinic you choose. You still have to have that consultation, and they have to tell you, here are the consequences. This is a life-changing decision. These are the ramifications, this, that, and the third. Then you can't make the appointment for the abortion that same day. It's illegal. So then you have to set an appointment for said abortion. Now, mind you, things around here with these time frames, numbers are going to be crunching like crazy.
Well, there's just no way to find out you're pregnant and in 3 days have an abortion. There's just not.
There's no way. 3 days, 3 weeks, whatever. It's just no way.
Found out day 1, you're like, I know I want to get an abortion. I know I don't want to have a kid. So okay, great. So you're at 5 weeks. Let's just use 5 weeks. I'll give them the half a week, 5.5. Let's just say it's 5 weeks. Okay, great. We have 5 days now, because businesses ain't open 7 days a week. They open 5 days a week in the medical field, typically. So you find out you're pregnant. Okay, great. You call the abortion clinic. They get you in next day. Great. You're in next day, you talk to them. The next day you come back and you have your sonogram. And according to this new Texas law, you have to wait 24 hours after your sonogram to even be able to have an abortion. So then that leaves one day. So if that doctor can't literally, you call, get seen, set up your sonogram, wait 24 hours, and then the following day do the abortion, you're out of luck. And that isn't going to happen unless you know somebody, period.
Yeah, that's
And
where
that's a
you
big
know
decision
somebody
in
who knows
5
somebody.
days.
Yeah, it's 5 days. I don't know. I mean, I say sleep on it, but something like that dramatic and life
Mhm.
changing,
Yes,
I don't know if 5 days is enough. It's not
it's not.
fair.
It's not.
It's not just. It's not.
We take
I can.
longer to buy a house. Don't know.
You're absolutely right. To buy a car, we take longer than that.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Just
absolutely.
it took me like 2 weeks to pick out, what couch I wanted.
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous. And now that you're putting everything on a time crunch, how do you feel like things aren't going to be inundated? How
Yeah.
are those people? Now
Mhm.
everybody's in an upright, in an uproar. Everybody's going after every sexual encounter to make sure that they're not pregnant and buying like thousands of pregnancy tests because
Yeah.
now they have this time frame and this limit and they've
Right.
got to get in and they got to get in because if they don't get in, they're not going to get an abortion.
Right. And
Like,
so,
so
and that's
I
just
feel like it's going
one
to force
scenario.
us back to those back alleys. This will
It,
force us
it
back.
is.
This is not taking us forward in
Mhm.
medicine. I feel like this is taking us back
It
because
is.
it's going to be too inundated. There are already certain places in certain cities that don't even have abortion clinics. There are people driving to other states
Mhm.
because of the lack of abortion doctors and abortion clinics. They're going to be inundated. This is going to take us back. This is going to take us back to 1950 to 1960, where we're doing these back alley things.
Well, that, and not only that is if you have one of those back alley procedures right now, good luck getting into the hospital. You can't because everybody's there with COVID.
Yep.
So you can't even get in to get your infection taken care of. Or,
Mm-mm.
oh, we went too far and we perfed your uterus, and there's so many different things. I mean, that could happen. Just no. And I don't even know all the things that could happen because L&D and OB was GYN is not my thing. But it was eye-opening for me to see this. And I'm not pro-abortion. I don't think it should be used as a form of birth control. There's birth control out there. It's
For that, it's
more,
preventative. There's
yes,
prophylaxis for this, people.
yes. And so there's a lot that I'm like, well, no, I don't feel personally that it should be used for that. I don't feel as though you should just be able to be like, yeah, I don't care. I mean, we can't, in one hand, say that somebody who's drinking and driving who kills a pregnant woman gets charged with 2 counts of manslaughter or whatever because they killed the mom and the
And
baby.
the baby.
And then on the other hand, say, oh, we don't care if the woman's pregnant or not, it's not a child. um, there's a lot of balance that has to take place within the judicial system. And I'm glad that I'm not one that has to make that decision because I think it is a little hairy. It doesn't matter for the mom who doesn't believe it's a baby, but it does matter for the mom who does believe it's her baby. You know, it's all about perception. And that's really not what law is based off of. It's not really based off of perception per se.
I was just generally taken back that right now with all the issues in the world going on,
Mhm.
that this is something that they're wanting to push through and push through rapidly.
Oh, yeah. And it's going to hit
You
other
know,
states hard. Other states
absolutely.
that are wanting to do this are going to follow right along. It's going to become very difficult for women to seek that care. And it's kind of sad because even though I am more so, I don't want to say that I'm all the way pro-life. I think that there are areas and times that abortion's needed. If I was raped and me going to get plan B wasn't the first thing that popped on my mind, I'm sorry,
You were
or
only traumatized.
you're right. And then I found out I'm pregnant. And then I'm like, no, I don't want to deal with this. I can't. I don't, that's going to be too traumatic for me. There are women who are victims of rape who have their kid and they're glad that they didn't do that. And they are absolutely entitled to that right. But I think that you should also be entitled to that right to terminate if that's what you feel. So I am very much, it's not a means of birth control, but I very much am. There is a time and place for it. And I think that I'm not the one
Why
that
is it
makes
up
that
to the
decision, and neither
women?
should any other individual. It should be up to the person that is pregnant. And if it was a pregnancy that was done, with two willing partners, if both of those partners are okay with terminating that pregnancy, then it should be fine. I mean, I do think it gets a little sticky if you have mom who wants to terminate and dad who doesn't.
Oh
And then
yeah.
that that is a problem. I mean, because at that point, we always talk about, men being involved and doing their part. And as soon as you have one that wants to be involved and do their part and the woman doesn't agree, then they're supposed to just say, okay, and walk away. I mean, that's not fair either.
Well, no, I think so many things. One, I'm not a very judgmental person. I think I'm very open-minded, especially compared to where I was maybe when I was 21. But I do believe in a woman's right to choose, because so many times we're not left the option to, not just with this abortion, but just our body in general. And it's so crazy to me how they put all these stipulations on women, but then there are none on men.
I was thinking about
Why
that earlier.
why is this bill only targeted to women? You're assuming that women are willing participants in this. Like, there are other forms of birth control. I don't know if I know men have heard of vasectomies before. I mean, I know men have heard of condoms.
Mhm.
Just like women are responsible to use birth control, so are men. And
Yes.
I don't feel that it's fair that it always comes down to the law telling women what to do, but men have there's nothing that in this bill that says anything about the man who raped the woman, about the man who was doing incest to the woman, and it baffles and it boggles. Well, it doesn't baffle me anymore, because it's like the boys club, whatever, but it's sickening to me. It disgusts me.
Oh, I failed to mention that. I'm so glad you brought that up. The bill did say that if you were the one that did the raping or the incest, that you were not entitled to sue.
This is the same guy who said he was going to eradicate rape and
I read that probably
incest.
4 times because I was like, I know I misunderstood that. I know I read that point wrong. I know I did. I know that I did.
I just don't understand it. Well, like I said, it's the boys club, whatever, the good old boys club. But still, it's not right. It's not right. I see so many other issues that are going to be inundating our emergency rooms and
Mhm.
our urgent care centers and our PCPs off of this. And I believe in life. I also believe in the woman's right to choose. And I also believe that things are not black and white.
They're not. And I think so many people in nursing see it that way. Like, that's why I feel the way I feel, is because, like, no, I myself would not do that. I feel it's wrong. It would be very difficult for me if I was pregnant to get an abortion for any
Mhm.
reason. I think that just because you don't want it to occur doesn't mean that you're living the other person's life.
Well,
That,
I was in that situation that you were talking about with my last son, and I know what
right.
we talked about it in an episode before, where
Mhm.
the doctor straight up looked me in my face and told me, "You could always have more children. You're my patient, not the unborn child."
Yes. And
And I
so,
said to her, "That's not your choice, it's my choice." And she straight up told me to my face,
yeah,
"No, honey, that baby is not born yet.
yeah.
That's not a person. You're my patient. You're the only patient."
But to you, that he was a person,
Absolutely.
and so that's why I'm like, well, there's a lot of gray, but then I think that that's one of the reasons as a healthcare provider, we see that gray.
Hmm.
And if you don't, you might be in the wrong profession. If you think things are black and white, then healthcare is not the place for you, period.
Absolutely not. That critical thinking that they try to teach you in nursing, and
Yeah,
some people get it and some people don't.
no,
Like, those critical thinking skills,
yeah.
they're very, very, very important,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of gray in medicine, period.
I kind of agree with the Roe versus Wade. You have up until 22 weeks, and then at that point, it needs to be medical intervention, because at that point, it can be a viable live baby. And I think that
Versus Wade 1973, not
it's
Texas Senate Bill number 8.
right. And I
Yeah.
think that it's really important to say, okay, well, hold on, there is a big difference here. Now, I mean, maybe if you're going to the abortion clinic for the fourth time in a year, you need to have some conversations.
Well, there should be laws about that,
You
instead
know,
of making laws like Bill number 8. You know
right.
what I
At that
mean?
point, it's like, okay, there are things that happen, and people, I mean, I had a roommate. I remember her, she had gotten pregnant and she did not want to have a child, and she got an abortion. And, she looked at me and she said, "Do you look at me differently?" And I'm like, no, like this is, it's something she has to live with. I mean,
Yeah, it's her life. Like she has to hold the burden,
right.
or, if she considers it a non-burden, because, you never know.
You
For
don't.
her, everybody else is different. For some people, it's easy, and for some people, it's not.
Right.
Like
And
you
for her,
said, when you're
it
four
wasn't.
times in 1 year, obviously you have no issue with it.
Right. And so I think that there are better ways to regulate than this. And maybe this is a good way to get people talking to figure out better ways. But whatever this guy's got going on here, this is not it.
It's not. And I totally agree with that. Like we had just mentioned, this this is this probably isn't the best way. I can see here in the so near future that this is going to even be more of a topic, especially when it starts inundating, physicians and midwives and abortion clinics and everything else. And instead of trying to limit the right of a woman and their privacy, maybe they should start making laws about the limit or number of abortions a person can have.
Mhm.
Maybe that would have been a better route to go than
Mhm.
trying to control someone's ability to choose.
Right. I agree.
And no matter how you may feel about it personally, abortion, whether it's the moral ramifications or as a health professional, this ruling is going to change the topic of pregnancy. It's going to change the topic of abortion and what's appropriate medical care. And, that back alley that we've been talking about literally is going
Mhm.
to come back. We want to continue this conversation because we know in the future it's going to continue to change. We don't, right now, it's just a Bill 8 sitting on the, Senate floor in Texas. But we want to keep eyes on it because we're medical professionals and we want to educate ourselves.
And it's going to hit
And
other states and it's going to spread.
absolutely. And
Mhm.
so we need to know as nurses what the options are in order to best inform our patients. And we want to be able to provide the best care that we can for women, for children, for families,
Mhm.
etc.
Absolutely. And of course, we are always open to comments or, different thought processes if we haven't touched on something that any one of our listeners say, "Hey, well, they didn't even think about this." There's a lot that I think that gets missed with these bills, and I think having that conversation, that open conversation more can open people's eyes because we are very big on education and informing and reading. And if everybody was like that, then we would be in a better spot, I think.
I agree.
The more you read, the more you're opening up your thought process there. So we'll of course list all of our references from today, everything with our numbers, and I'll even link the bill that I was reading as well to our website, which is the nursingpostpodcast.com. Of course, subscribe if you like our podcast, and please leave us your thoughts and comments. And we thank you for listening to the Nursing Post.
Till next time.